All right, let's dive right into this explainer on how France became the world's seventh largest economy and such a massive historical superpower. When we think about global titans, we usually focus on their leaders, their technological innovations, or their militaries. But what if the secret to immense national power and how it actually shapes the global economy we all live in today is written right into the very earth it sits on? Today, we're unpacking the incredibly perfect, almost cheat code level geography of France.
So let's kick things off with a quick test of your geographical intuition. If I were to ask you right now which country shares the longest border with France, what would you guess? I mean, you'd probably assume it's Belgium, Germany, or maybe Spain down to the south, right? It makes total sense if you're just looking at a standard map of Europe. But the actual answer is going to completely shatter your assumptions.
Believe it or not, France's longest continuous land border is actually with Brazil. Yeah, Brazil, in South America. I know it sounds like a total trick question, but the France we usually picture in Europe is really just the mainland. The total area of France actually extends way beyond Europe to overseas territories all across the globe. We're talking everything from the dense jungles of South America to islands in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and even right up near the Canadian coastline.
So, now that we've totally expanded our worldview, here is exactly what we'll be covering to see how this geography built a powerhouse. First, the global French footprint. Second, the natural fortress borders. Third, the vulnerable northern flatlands. Fourth, oceans and trade superhighways. And finally, rivers, agriculture, and energy. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The global French footprint. So, looking back a few centuries, the French Empire actually controlled a staggering 10% of the world's total land area. That is a massive slice of the global pie. From Africa to Southeast Asia, French influence was quite literally everywhere. In fact, up until the 17th century, 1 in 5 people in Europe was French. They were this absolute demographic and geographic giant, heavily shaping international trade and culture on every single continent.
But maintaining that massive dominance didn't just happen seamlessly. It came with some severe demographic drops that seriously threatened their standing on the world stage. Over time, they lost approximately 2 million people during various historical conflicts and the French Revolution. And that slow decline, it was later compounded by another absolutely devastating loss of 1.2 to 1.3 million French lives during World War I. This resulted in a severely dropping population that fundamentally challenged their geopolitical stability.
To counter that falling population, the state took some pretty extreme measures. Back in the 1960s and 70s, France actually relocated in what historical accounts describe as the forced removal or relocation of thousands of children from its overseas island territories to the mainland just to boost their numbers. And looking at their modern influence, there are 14 African nations that remain deeply tied to France today. Their financial institutions, key resources, and currency rates are strictly fixed to the French euro. So their global footprint never really vanished at all. It just evolved into this powerful underlying economic infrastructure that's still impacting global markets right now.
Moving on to Section 2, the natural fortress borders.
Okay, let's shift our focus down south to the Pyrenees Mountains. This range creates a massive, practically impenetrable natural barrier between France and Spain. Think back to the 8th century. Muslim armies had just conquered Spain and were looking to expand further into Europe with France as their next target. But while they managed to cross the flatter areas, this formidable mountain range stopped them cold, like a giant stone wall. Geography quite literally dictated the course of continental history right there.
And it gets even better for them when we look to the southeast. The Alps, which, by the way, are Europe's tallest mountain range, protect half of the entire eastern side of the country. For the rest of that eastern border, the Rhine River steps in, basically acting as this rushing, natural defensive moat dividing France and Germany. So from the south to the east, the country is practically a walled garden, naturally defended from outside threats.
Which brings us to Section 3, the vulnerable northern flatlands. Here's the catch though. While the south and east are completely locked down by these towering mountains and rushing rivers, the northern border is completely flat. And historically, this geographic vulnerability was an absolute disaster. Because there was zero natural shield, it directly resulted in 3 separate, devastating German invasions over just a 70-year period. First in 1870, then again in 1914 during World War I, and finally in 1939 during World War II. It's a pretty tragic reminder of what happens when your natural geography just leaves the front door wide open.
All right, Section 4. Oceans and trade superhighways.
Now, beyond its land borders, France holds what is basically the ultimate geographical trump card in Europe. It is the only European country with simultaneous, direct access to both the North Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. If you look at the GDP per capita of the countries surrounding France, there's just a massive amount of wealth circulating globally. By being the singular geographic bridge between these two vital bodies of water, France is placed right at the center of all that economic energy. They essentially become the inevitable toll booth and the ultimate middleman for European wealth.
You can really think of this setup as the ultimate maritime superhighway.
This dual access means Northern European trade flows straight down through the world's busiest sea junction, the English Channel. From there, the trade routes follow an incredibly efficient 5-step path. Down the English Channel, into the Celtic Sea, crossing the Bay of Biscay, slipping through the Strait of Gibraltar, and finally pushing through the Suez Canal all the way to Asia and the Middle East. France sits perfectly positioned right over this heavy traffic route.
And let's just talk about the sheer versatility of that Mediterranean access for a second. Because of it, France can seamlessly ship goods out to the Americas via Gibraltar, set up direct trade routes to Black Sea nations, and easily access the booming economies of the East through the Suez Canal. On top of all that, goods arriving from Asia and the Middle East at the St. Louis port can be effortlessly moved entirely inland via the Rhine River, right to the center of France and outward to the rest of Europe. Honestly, it's an importer and exporter's absolute dream scenario.
But what about the western side, facing the Atlantic? Well, where nature didn't provide a bridge, France just went ahead and built one. They maximized their closeness to the United Kingdom, which is the world's 6th largest economy, by the way, by physically connecting the two nations via the Channel Tunnel. This is a massive feat of engineering, running from Folkestone in the UK right over to Calais in northern France. It effectively bridges British trade directly into Paris, and from there, seamlessly out to the rest of Central Europe's rail network.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5. Rivers, agriculture, and energy. So, moving inland, France is woven with this extensive, beautiful river network that connects up all of its major cities. It basically ensures there are practically no water supply issues anywhere on the mainland. But more importantly, these rivers are constantly nourishing incredibly fertile land. Because of this perfect internal geography, France actually boasts the 2nd largest agricultural land area in all of Europe, sitting just behind Ukraine.
And it's not just about farming. Sure, those rivers make France Europe's 3rd largest agricultural exporter, but the flowing water itself is brilliantly harnessed. This vast river system is utilized to generate massive amounts of hydroelectric power, making it the country's 2nd largest supply of energy. So their internal geography is quite literally feeding the population and keeping the lights on, driving an incredible degree of national self-sufficiency.
Now, to protect all of this incredible domestic and international wealth, France actually circles right back to that global footprint we talked about earlier. Remember those overseas island territories in the Indian Ocean? France utilizes them to maintain heavy military bases. These distant outposts act like global watchtowers, allowing France to heavily guard its lucrative trade routes and keep a very close eye on shifting geopolitics in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. It's what ensures that the global supply chains bringing goods to your local stores remain completely uninterrupted.
Which brings us to a really fascinating conclusion. After seeing how impassable mountains, perfectly placed oceans, and life-giving rivers built this economic titan and shaped centuries of warfare and trade, you kind of have to wonder, right? How much of human history and global dominance is simply decided by the literal ground we stand on? Does geography dictate a nation's destiny, or is it merely the canvas upon which a superpower paints its strategy? I'll let you be the judge of that. Next time you look at a map, remember to look just a little closer at the rivers and the mountains. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.